This is Peter here, and you are Derek, right?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Supposed to say yes.
Sorry, the metronome came back on.
You can't leave me hanging here. There's only two of us.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start us off. We're talking about Star Fox today. Tell me about your experience with Star Fox. What do you like Star Fox? You played it?
Yeah, so I haven't been too big of a player for Star Fox. I guess I played Star Fox 64 back when I was younger, but I never really got into, the Star Fox Adventures, or I don't really even know the other titles, so I'm pretty new to the whole series, I guess.
Okay, well, you know what? It's a little bit later. You're a little younger than me, so you wouldn't have been old enough probably to play the original Star Fox. So let's talk about the kind of the roots of Star Fox here, because we have a new Star Fox come out this year, and we're gonna speculate about that. But let's talk about the roots. So you said you started off with N64, Star Fox 64. What's your experience? What's your memories of that?
Yeah, I remember, playing with buddies. I don't remember my family having it for the 64, but whenever I went to a friend, that's usually a game you played. And I remember because it was one of those games where you almost did a path to, it was a pretty short game. You did like the same 10 levels. And being a kid, there was all these secret levels, and it was so cool to try to unlock any of them, but it was so difficult. So I always remember, replaying the levels over and over and over again with my friends, trying to get to these other sectors, which I thought was one of the coolest things
Sector Z.
as a kid playing this game. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. You said I don't remember my family. I'm part of your family. So no, we didn't have Star Fox 64. We didn't buy it. And what's funny is it's probably the game that I have, for not owning it on the N64, probably the game that I've played and beaten the most amount of times for not owning the original version. I mean, I bought it on Virtual Console for Wii. I bought it on the 3DS. So I feel like I've almost played it every possible way other than owning the original.
Yeah, I have the 3DS version too, yeah. So I got back into it maybe a couple months ago. I've just done a few runs for it, but it's nice to go back to the roots, yeah.
Well, the had it, remember? Had it.
I was so young. I was like 4.
I gotta bleep his last name now. Yeah, it was one of those games that most people had. At least in our generation. I mean,
it was such a so easy and simple. Like a real shooter, there is no complexity to it. There is no long 20-hour story like Ocarina of Time. You just have this simple, Star Fox game that anybody could pick up and play. I think that's the reason it was so liked.
Yeah, and it wasn't super hardcore where, it's all score-based and you lose and it just kills you the first couple levels and it's all about getting a high score. Yet actually, you could easily beat the game, which I think as a kid was a nice feature.
Yeah, totally. And you can always go back, again, like I said, the secret levels. There's always a reason to go back and play more.
I actually played the original Star Fox. I remember renting it on the Super Nintendo, probably when you were still about 1 year old. And let me tell you, I barely beat the first level. Like, I was probably 5, and this game was tough. It was really tough. I mean, it was cool, but man, it ran at maybe 15 frames a second. It was super choppy, and it was very hard. So 64 is definitely where my memories lie, most people's as well.
Do you know what? I'm just curious because I know 64 did pretty well in sales. What's the Super Nintendo sales? Like, did it do as well?
I don't know. It was considered a success. It wasn't a failure by any means. I mean, they greenlit a sequel right away.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, one of the cool things about it was that it was one of the first games to use kind of like 3D polygons, rather than where, F-Zero and Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo use sprite-based 3D, where if they turned, it would just change to a different sprite. In Star Fox, you actually had this polygonal triangle R-Wing ship that would actually change and it would actually move, and that it was actually running off the cartridge. The Super Effects chip, it was called, was actually doing that processing for the Super Nintendo. So it was pretty cool what the technology at the time. It was pretty the first Star Fox for Super Nintendo was pretty groundbreaking, and they definitely considered it a massive success.
Cool, yeah, I didn't know that, yeah.
So do you have any, after Star Fox 64 and the first one obviously, did you play any of the other Star Fox games?
So the only one I even can think of off the top of my head is Star Fox Adventures, which I think is the GameCube. It's the one where you're playing, on the ground as Star Fox. I remember you playing it and I watching it a couple times, and I think it was, I mean, I don't know how well it was received because you didn't fly at all. So I think it was a totally...
Well, few corrections here for you, because I played Star Fox Adventures. His name's not Star Fox. His name is Fox McCloud. Star Fox is just the name of the series.
Yeah.
You know, no one plays Smash Bros. And says, I'm going to choose Star Fox unless they're a noob.
I know. It's...
And they're actually, you know, interesting thing, there was flying sections in that game.
Okay, I didn't know that. I just remember the dinosaurs.
They were incredibly brief, and I think they were just kind of put in later in development to appease the fans. That game actually, I don't know if you remember, was made by Rare.
I didn't know that, actually.
Did you remember that?
No.
You didn't. It was actually the last game made by Rare.
Before they moved to Microsoft, or in period?
No, I mean, it was the last game they made with Nintendo before, yes, moving to Microsoft. And if I remember correctly, they announced that. That announcement came only days after Star Fox Adventures released.
Okay.
Funny thing, because I know you're too young to remember this as well. Star Fox Adventures was actually supposed to be a game called Dinosaur Planet.
I did know. I knew this from some time you and I have talked about this, because of they made a dinosaur, all these polygons, and they decided just to throw Star Fox name and the character models in it too.
Yeah, I think it was Miyamoto's decision. They turned it into a Star Fox game, and yeah, it was a little bit weird with Fox, you know, on foot running around and doing kind of like a B-tier Zelda style gameplay.
Yeah, and the fact that, you know, I'm pretty sure none of the other Star Fox characters were in that game. No, you know, Slippy, no Peppy, no Falco.
No, I mean, I think they made some silly cameos, but nothing significant. I actually remember Star Fox Adventures. I was insanely hyped for it. It was one of my most wanted GameCube games. I was a little bit disappointed with Super Mario Sunshine, and I remember Star Fox Adventures was the big adventure game from Rare. Rare was one of my favorite developers at the time, and I remember it being one of those games that when you're a kid and you play and you kind of think, you know, I like this game, I'm playing it, I beat it, but in your head you think something's not right about this game. Like something's not satisfying.
Yeah.
Satisfying me. So yeah, overall, I'd say the game to me was a pretty big disappointment.
Is that the last Star Fox? Is that the last Star Fox game there's been until now? I guess.
No, not at all. I mean, there was Star Fox Command on DS.
Okay, I actually own that game. I just don't. That game was so off the path for me too. That game seems like not really true to the roots either. I remember I had that game, and I just remember it was more. It was almost like a tactical flying game as opposed to an on-rail shooter, which was, I bought that game expecting something totally different than what I got.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you remember from Star Fox 64, they had the on-rails kind of sections, and they also had what was called all-range mode. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And all-range mode was kind of like, you know, Rogue Squadron. If you flew to the left, it went to the left. You could explore a territory where on the on-rails, you just went kind of forward. Star Fox Command was fully all-range mode.
Okay, but there's also aspects of that game that were more tactical. Like you had to control several ships and fly them in directions to it. It was a weird combat.
Yeah, there's some weird strategy, and it's actually interesting. The original developer, I believe his name was Dylan Cuthbert, who was the designer and game designer of the original Star Fox. And Star Fox 64, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong on that. He came back to make Star Fox Command. So that it's kind of it's almost like the original vision for Star Fox. The guy who had the original vision for Star Fox came back and made Star Fox Command, which I don't think panned out very well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that game sold very well.
No, and the story is apparently horrible in it. There's multiple story options, and apparently they're just stupid, badly written stories. I didn't play it, so I don't really know. I played a little bit of multiplayer, I think, and wasn't impressed. But we missed another Star Fox game. You know, before we dive into Star Fox Wii U speculation, we got to cover everything. There's one more Star Fox game. I'm going to test you. Do you know what it is?
I mean, if you're excluding the 3DS one, the remake, I have no idea.
You're showing your age here. Okay, well, there's actually two more Star Fox games. That's a trick question. One was Star Fox 2 for the SNES, which was it was canceled.
Okay, so it never came to be released.
It never released, but it actually did get a beta version leaked, and people were able to get their hands on it. But let's not go into that because it's not a retail release. There was another one actually on the GameCube. made by Namco called Star Fox Assault.
Was it an on-rail shooter?
It had. I suggest you go and look up a trailer for it right now in the background here. It had a mix of on rails shooter, like traditional on rails Star Fox R-wing sections. It had, but it also had like on foot sections, like almost like a third person shooter.
Oh, maybe I do actually remember this game. I'm looking at the video right now. It looks like I've seen gameplay of this game before.
You know, it was a game back when I had a GameCube. I did rent it back when rentals were a thing.
Okay, it does look really familiar.
And to be honest, it's another game that kind of soured my impression of Star Fox because it was another game I was really looking forward to. I was really excited about it. Actually, going back to the GameCube, I believe it was around 2003, 2004, where Nintendo, I don't know if you probably don't remember because you were just a child.
I was like 12.
Well, you should have been up on this stuff, you know?
Did this game have multiplayer? Star Fox?
It did.
Okay, I think I remember playing multiplayer with you then.
We must have played it. But I mean, it wasn't great.
No, this game was not memorable in the player.
It was ambitious. I think the multiplayer was really ambitious to have kind of this open, you could jump out of the R-Wing. You could actually fly the R-Wing and jump out on the side and shoot people and do like a kamikaze style and like jump off, shoot them, jump into a tank. It was really open-ended. It was almost like a Star Fox version of Battlefield.
Okay, cool, yeah.
But I remember, and it goes back to a time on the GameCube era where Nintendo was making lots of weird partnerships with third parties in Japan. They partnered with Sega for F-Zero, and they partnered with Namco for Star Fox. Do you remember F-Zero on GameCube?
F-Zero GX, yeah, that was great though.
That was fantastic. Yeah. So F-Zero GX came out in 2003, and it was probably is my favorite racing game ever. And so I was really excited. Hey, if Sega can make this a great F-Zero game, I wonder what Namco will bring to Star Fox, because they had done Ace Combat, and they had shown off this ambitious game with orchestrated soundtrack and all this stuff, and I was really looking forward to it. And I think I was really disappointed. The on foot stuff was really janky. It was like a poor man's third-person shooter. It just didn't control well, and really weird animation. It's not one to remember.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, for a GameCube game, it doesn't look that graphically appealing.
Yeah, and it only had a couple on-rail shooter sections, and it just kind of felt like it didn't feel like a very significant upgrade to what had already come out, even on N64. Star Fox 64, in my opinion, is the pinnacle of the series.
Yeah, just to touch on what you just said, I mean, to me, we're going to talk about the Star Fox Wii U in a second, but I'm not entirely excited for that game, just because to me, Star Fox 64 was a great game. Then every other title is in such the wrong direction and such a letdown, in my opinion, or not true to the roots, that I'm very questionable of what this next one's going to be. Even though it looks like it's a little more back to the original, style, I'm still kind of up in the air about, what's this game going to be.
Okay, well, it's interesting because I feel like I'm on the totally opposite side of the fence. You seem to align yourself with what most gamers feel. That no one feels that excited about Star Fox from the impression I get. But for me, I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to be great.
But why? Why are you excited about? Considering the past 3 installments or whatever have just been, mediocre at the best.
Okay, well, here's one of my reasons. For one, the last 3 Star Fox games weren't really developed in-house at Nintendo. You had Star Fox Adventures, which wasn't really a Star Fox game made by Rare, and this is like, Rare that started to go downhill.
Yeah, Rare on its way out, too. Yeah.
On its way out, probably there's some, animosity between Nintendo and Rare. They probably had to push it out the door. Then the next Star Fox game, which was from Namco, and they make good games, but I wouldn't say they make great games. Outside of Soul Calibur, they're not known to make great adventure games or great. I mean, I'm gonna get flamed for this probably. I don't find that they make the same type of games as EAD. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. I agree.
And then the next game was was published by Nintendo, but it was actually developed by Q Games, which was Dylan Cuthbert's company. Is
he third party?
I I believe they are independent.
Okay.
And I think Nintendo contracted him to make Star Fox Command, and I think Nintendo Japan did handle some of that.
Okay.
Interesting thing about Dylan Cuthbert, he was only a young dude when he made the first Star Fox. I think he was 18. He's like a brilliant programmer, and he moved to Japan. He actually, I believe he married a Japanese lady. I'm going to try to find the picture here where Miyamoto was at his wedding in Japan.
That's pretty cool.
That's badass.
Yeah.
So, for Nintendo to go back to him and let them make his own Star Fox game, I thought it's a pretty unique experience. But sorry, I'm getting beside the point here. So Nintendo hasn't really made their own Star Fox game in a while, and let alone Miyamoto. You know what I mean? Like Miyamoto at the helm of this. I believe he's producing. I don't think he's directing. He's not directing the new Star Fox, but he is definitely producing, and he definitely is spearheading it, so to speak.
Yeah, he's definitely. I mean, Miyamoto usually has his hands pretty heavily in things that he's producing, whether he's directing it or not.
Absolutely, and Pikmin 3 turned out great, and this is kind of the first project he seems to be taking on with kind of on his back with some pride since Pikmin 3.
I'm just a little surprised that they're even going back to Star Fox, knowing the last 3 games. I don't know the sales offhand or anything, but I don't think they sold very well. And there's other series for Nintendo that haven't sold well either, and they've kind of pushed them aside and said, these aren't IP that are doing successful anymore. So I'm really surprised that Star Fox is one they decided to pick up and say, Miyamoto, take this one and see what you can do with it.
Well, I would ask you, like, what IP would you want them to bring back instead?
Well, you mentioned F-Zero for one. I think Wave Race would be really cool. 1080 snowboarding. So I think there's a lot of games that they haven't really delved into. And I know Metroid is always up, and there's definitely going to be something coming. But Metroid even has been mentioned for quite a while.
I mean, I just feel like F-Zero probably, I mean, I don't have the sales data on me, but F-Zero has never sold as well as Star Fox.
Oh, see, I would disagree. I think, F-Zero GX probably sold much better than Star Fox Adventures or Assault.
Oh, you're wrong on that, actually. F-Zero GX was not a commercial success.
Oh, that's surprising for how well
Believe it or not.
Critically reviewed. I mean, how well the public loves it.
I mean, to separate, remember that the hardcore gamers that we talk about and we read about on NeoGAF and other game platforms is not the general public. You put F-Zero GX in the average gamer's hands, and their ship is going to blow up in about 2 seconds.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
it's not very casual, and I mean, if you look, I mean, I'll pull it up here, the box art for F-Zero GX. I do blame this horrible box art for at least 100,000 sales missing,
Yeah.
It's bad, the F-Zero GX box art. And, I remember at the time, certain reviewers didn't actually like it that much. They said it was too hard, way too hard.
I mean, yeah, it's notorious for its difficulty.
But, I mean, in short, Star Fox has always been a more successful franchise than F-Zero, for sure. And, Wave Race, that's an interesting one, but it's kind of outside. And Wave Race and 1080 were interesting experience when they came out, but they're a little bit outside of Nintendo's realm now, I feel. They don't really make sports games or realistic games.
But you know what? It's not even about reviving these IPs that I mentioned. It's more about, why are they picking one of them when they could make new IPs, they could make new anything. They're kind of just like, going back and hoping this one can be resuscitated, which I'm not sure I necessarily agree with and think it's going to happen.
Well, I mean, speaking of new IP, did you buy Codename Steam?
I plan to.
It actually tanked in March, by the way, horribly.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because everyone wants new IPs, but the thing is that about Nintendo is that they're so used to their bread and butter, and you always get the Mario, you always get the Zelda, Mario Karts, you always get those kind of Kirby. And the thing is that when they make a new game, it's so hard for the consumers to grab onto that because most consumers only buy the Marios, the Kirbys, and the Zeldas.
That's true. I mean, I'd even argue that Kirby doesn't really do that well commercially. I think it just they're easy to develop and they're such a loyal fan base.
Yeah.
But with Star Fox, you're right. I mean, it's not especially after the many. It's like, think about it. When did Star Fox 64 come out? 1997. It's been, it's been almost 20 years since there's been a really great new Star Fox game.
But you're assuming this one's gonna be great. But yeah, I know what you mean.
I mean, yes, I am assuming it's going to be great. At the very least, it'll be unique.
There's some new cool stuff that he's been talking about it. So,
I mean, I think what it comes down to is actually interesting tidbit here is that when Sakurai was developing Kid Icarus, before they had actually landed on the Kid Icarus IP, which is also another franchise that was revived after 2 decades, he actually did consider making it a Star Fox game apparently. So it was kind of like, at Nintendo, the way from what I gather, the way they develop their games isn't like, hey, this is the IP, let's build on what we've done. It's more like, hey, a bunch of guys have made a fun prototype. What franchise do we what franchise do we associate with that gameplay? Which kind of also ties back into Splatoon, which is coming out soon, where they had considered making it like a Mario style shooter. And, they had this gameplay prototype, and I think that's why Nintendo games are so different than other games, is where they don't choose the IP and run from that. They, a lot of times, especially in, EAD Tokyo and EAD Japan, I guess there is no, the EAD only exists in Japan, but they design their gameplay first, and they find something fun that's fun to control and fun to play. So my thought was that, Star Fox is something that it just fit with the gameplay that they were trying to develop.
Yeah.
And so jumping into Star Fox U here and some of the things about it that I'm excited about, other than the fact that Miyamoto's been working on it, it's actually something that, it sounds like a brand new experience, really. Like there's nothing quite like it.
Yeah, I've got that impression too. He seemed to be incorporating a lot of new aspects or new. One thing I would say is the Wii U gamepad controller. Miyamoto seems to want to be including all the capabilities that controller has into this game, which I think is not many Wii U titles are doing these days.
True, and I actually think that a year ago or so, when people were giving Nintendo the heat for their gamepad and saying, "What are you doing with this gamepad?" I think Miyamoto said, I got to develop games with this gamepad.
Yeah.
And I think that was when he said it's time to do Star Fox. Interesting, though, because in a quote, he actually said they were working on a Star Fox on the Wii for years, actually. They were messing around for years.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years, I think it was.
Yeah. So, about 6 years, he says. It's a quote here. He goes, we originally began working on Star Fox back on the Wii, and we had a small group of people experimenting with it for many years, maybe about 6 years. And then he said, so we instead moved the experimentation to the Wii U, using some of those assets, and it's been 6 to 10 months they've been working on it. And that was what he said at last E3, which means that...
It's almost been 2 years, yeah.
Well, by this E3, it will have been nearly 2 years, just under 2 years, and by the time it comes out, it'll be about 2.5 years, which is still pretty short for HD game development. But it's funny because the way from what they've shown so far, the way you play the new Star Fox U, I think it should be called Star Fox Universe because it's like perfect name.
Yeah, that name's been tossed around a lot. I've seen on the internet.
Well, the leak, there was a fake leak or whatever a bit ago before the last Nintendo Direct, Star Fox Horizon. Did you see that?
I think I saw that. I didn't know too much about it, though.
Oh, there's nothing about it. It was just a logo leak.
Okay.
But it wasn't real. But who knows? I mean, some of these leaks are turning out to be real.
I know. It's kind of crazy, yeah.
I think Universe sounds good because it kind of brings the Wii U brand back into it. But the idea is that you are looking at your TV, holding the gamepad in your hands. You're looking at the TV, and on the TV you see, the R-Wing flying around in, an all-range style mode. And on the gamepad, when you look at the screen on the gamepad, you're seeing like a first-person view out the cockpit.
Yeah.
And your first-person view out the cockpit has like a reticule where you can aim and shoot. So your movement of the gamepad can shoot enemies without having to re-aim your R-Wing. Remember in the 64 version, and basically every Star Fox with an R-Wing, to re-aim to aim, you had to actually move your entire R-Wing, where this finally kind of breaks free from that.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, you gotta move your ship to the top corner to aim there too.
Yeah, I mean, and I've never really got into the Ace Combat series too deeply, but from what I remember playing them on the PS2, it's the same thing. Like your reticule is what's aiming and controlling the direction of your ship or your jet. So I think
mean, in a way though, that kind of makes sense though, right?
well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert on aircraft,
Aerophysics, but
but
I just mean like unless you have mobile guns. But yeah, okay.
well, I figured. I mean, some aircraft would have like a gunner in the back. I think, right, aiming independently of the dude flying, the pilot flying the aircraft. I could be wrong.
No, no, for sure. And I think Miyamoto even touches that, and we can get to that later about the co-op ideas. But
Yeah. And I mean, let's also remember that Star Fox takes place in space. So granted, they have better technology, even though it's an evolved fox. So we can only imagine it's light years after not light years, many hundreds of years after humans have gone extinct. There's a deep lore here, hidden lore.
Light years, yeah, for sure.
So I think that's really cool. Like I think the idea of being able to fly around and then getting shot and feeling your controller rumble and then aiming around with the gamepad, it sounds really neat to me, and I just think that's unique. I think that's kind of unlike anything we've really seen, and I think it could re-spark. It could give a nice spark and a new imagination to flight battles.
Totally,
whatever you call it.
And dogfights or whatever. But
Dogfights, yes.
I mean, I agree. I think it's a unique idea, and I think it could pan out really well. The only thing is that I've just, if you're reading people's comments or, worries about the games, they're worried that this might be a gimmick. Because a lot of Nintendo plays off a gimmick, and if they're using, some people hate gyroscope controls. And, I mean, if that becomes a gimmick to this game or something that's mandatory to this game, a lot of people might potentially avoid this game just for that one control scheme, not having the option to do another.
It's interesting. Yeah, I think that seems to be the number one worry. But I mean, pulling some. I actually made this thread on NeoGAF called the Star Fox Wii U Info Dissection and Speculation, where I just plowed through every piece of data and every quote I could find about this new Star Fox and everything Miyamoto has said. And I think he says a lot, considering the game was supposed to release 1 year later. It's supposed to come out this fall. But they do. There's a lot of quotes saying that you're going to have lots of control options. And one of the people who played at USA Today, there's a quote that says, "Players steer their ship with the left thumbstick, while the motion sensors on the gamepad you can turn to aim at enemies, but you can use the right thumbstick to independently aim at targets while flying." So I think you will be able to play this game.
Dual analog, yeah.
Dual analog, yeah, which makes a lot of sense. And let me just dig up the quote here from Miyamoto. He did say that you would... okay, so Miyamoto says here about there's multiple control options. He says, "You'll also be able to press a button to switch the view from one screen to the other. So you could play with the cockpit view on the TV and the fighter view down on the gamepad if you feel like that's a better way to play." And then it says down here, Game Informer says, "Pilots can control the game either with the gamepad's analog sticks or motion controls."
Okay, so that's pretty good that they're adding multiple gameplay options. Even though I'm not a big fan of at least the gyroscope controls, I do say that I'm a huge fan of the DS and the 3DS, and the fact that they're making the two screens, two different screens, and they're making it so potentially, you need both screens as opposed to, the only reason having a gamepad screen is for off-screen play. I love that idea. I love the two-screen gameplay of the handheld they made, so I hope they really turn that into something great.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound kind of like the golden idea for the gamepad, where you have a separate view on both the TV and the gamepad, and you can do some unique things. And I even think the idea of, they mentioned there'll be cutscenes in the game where, on one screen you'll still be playing, and maybe like, how Star Fox, the traditional Star Fox has your team kind of talking to you with little comic book strip style boxes. like when Falco says, "Hey,
Yeah.
don't shoot at me, wise guy," or whatever he says.
Yeah.
Bad example. That may appear on the bottom screen, and there might be some unique things there. I think that could be really dynamic and really cool, and a really good showcase for the dual screen.
Yeah, because I think they mentioned somewhere, I think Miyamoto said it, that during cutscenes, you'll be able to watch the cut screen happening, but you'll also be able to use the gamepad and look around while the cutscene's happening. I think that was mentioned somewhere. I don't know where the quote is.
Okay, I have a quote here. If there's an event this is from Miyamoto, if there's an event scene or cinema scene, funny, he just doesn't want to call it a cutscene, because you've got your cockpit view that's reserved for you, the event could be playing out on the TV and you've got a different view of that. So we'll be able to take advantage of you being able to feel more like you're part of the event that's happening because of your ability to look around with that second screen.
Which I think is such an awesome idea because, interactive cutscenes are really cool, but I think that just brings it to the next level.
Oh, I mean, let's say it's a thing where, you break into a cutscene where Fox is docking in a space station to, let's say, get his R-Wing cleaned. Let's say an R-Wing cleaner.
Yeah.
And he flies in, and it triggers on the main screen to a cutscene of him flying into a space station, and you can't control the R-Wing anymore, but on the gamepad you can still look around the space station.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea.
Now, one thing I do have a small worry about is that, as soon as a game is displayed on the TV and the gamepad, it does limit what they can do graphically.
Yeah, okay, because it needs to process both images.
Totally, and we saw that with how Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze can only be displayed on one or the other, and as well as Mario Kart 8, where it doesn't separate your screen onto the gamepad.
Yeah.
It just does split screen all the way. It just mirrors it. And I actually have a hinkling that the same thing is with Splatoon, where that's one of the reasons why you can't have two players simultaneously online, is just simply a frame rate thing. They wanted to keep 60 frames, and the only time you can actually do separate gamepad and TV multiplayer is a one-on-one, which is much less frenetic. So I think that's something that it may limit the graphic capabilities of the game. Like I just clearly the game would have looked a lot better if it didn't have to donate so much resources onto a gamepad screen, especially one that is moving with gyro and you're aiming left, right, up, and down, and you can't really get bad. You don't want to have Nintendo's not going to sacrifice frame rate.
Yeah, totally, and I totally agree. The only thing I that doesn't make me worry about the graphics is, if I think of Star Fox, the last thing I think about is graphics. Even Star Fox 64, SNES, even the new ones. To me, it's not like mind blowing. It's more about this on rails shooter, super simple, super fun. You pick it up, you can replay it over and over again. That's what to me Star Fox is. To me, it's not. Even though I know 64 didn't have the capabilities. I mean, if you're comparing it to, let's say, to me, Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time, for that time, was way better than Star Fox 64. Star Fox,
really?
Yeah, to me,
I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, differences of opinions.
I mean, you got to remember, like, when Star Fox 64 came out, it was pretty damn impressive.
Oh, I'm not saying it wasn't impressive. I don't think many people look at Star Fox and say, I need this to have amazing graphics to enjoy the gameplay. I hope it does. I hope it does. Obviously the better graphics always improves the overall of a game, but I just don't think it's something to concern myself about.
Yeah, I mean, Nintendo hasn't been a slouch on graphics on Wii U at all. I mean, even Mario Party 10 and Nintendo Land look great, so I'm not too worried.
Yeah.
I just the other fact is, like, this gets back to another thing Miyamoto was saying, is that the development time on Star Fox Wii U is extremely short. And considering they weren't even able to show it last E3, they didn't even show. They showed us an off-screen gameplay pic of Miyamoto playing, and even some of the hands-on previews said it looked really rough. It does lead. That's my biggest worry. I mean, where most people are worried about being a gameplay gimmick. See, I'm not worried about the gameplay, because I think that was refined and solidified before anything. Because and you can even see Miyamoto having a great time playing it in some of these images. And the hands-on say that it played well, It's not the gameplay I'm worried about, it's actually the graphics. Because apparently it looked really rough, and
Yeah, I mean, I have a quote right here from Kotaku, I think, and says, "The Star Fox demo was aesthetically quite rough, sporting unvarnished art, and it was more functional than pretty." So, I mean, your concerns are definitely not swept aside.
yeah. But I really think that, he did say they're looking for a team to work with. And I had a speculation that they might even, because this game has so many different styles of gameplay, they might even be working with a different developer on a different part of the gameplay. So maybe they're handing off the on rails levels to, Retro or a team or another team in Japan maybe, and Miyamoto's handling the all range mode levels, or what have you, or the levels with the helicopters.
Yeah.
Which brings us to another point. The game doesn't just have R-Wings, apparently. It actually has different vehicles. I mean, you'll be able to instantly go into a tank, which I think is really cool. You can fly in an R-Wing and choose to just land as a tank and start driving around.
Yeah, the versatility in that is pretty cool. I mean, I'm always down for more vehicles in Star Fox because I remember the tank being in the 64 one and that being a super cool addition to the game.
Yep, absolutely. And there's also a helicopter that apparently holds a robot by a tether, which sounds really weird.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll see. And some of these things just might not make it in the game.
For sure, but you know what? If there's one thing that I would always trust about Miyamoto is that he'll take these crazy ideas and he'll make them really fun and really interesting and really cool. If you look at Pikmin, someone said, before Pikmin 1 came out, that this is the idea they're going to go with of, this little creature and 100 little followers picking up, pieces of items around the world. No one would find it interesting, but it became such an awesome game because Miyamoto knows how to take these ideas and make them so fascinating.
Yeah, Pikmin's great. I remember when I first saw it, I was like, what is this? This is like stupid.
Yeah.
I was thinking as a kid, I'm like, Star Wars looked awesome and Wave Race looked awesome. And I was like, what is this game with little animal creatures? And it actually became one of my favorite launch window GameCube games. So that's what Miyamoto I have a lot of faith in. I mean, he takes pride in his work and he makes sure that it's fun. Of course, he slips up. He made Wii Music, which was horrible. But
Yeah.
to be honest, I only played a demo of it, and then I just said, nope, not paying for that.
Yeah, I don't know what their mindset was with that game.
I don't know. Who knows? That's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a lot of faith in Star Fox, and I think cooperatively, I think it sounds amazing. I think it sounds like it could be one of the best co-op games out there. It's not just two people shooting at things or two people doing the same thing, but times two. You really are. There's a mode apparently where one person's flying and another person is aiming and shooting.
Yeah, like true cooperative mode. Two people doing different tasks to solve the situation. Yeah.
I think that's really cool.
Me too. I'm for that. Yeah.
And I think that I had this vision that if they do go with an online multiplayer mode, and I'm kind of changing topics into a potential competitive dogfight mode, if they went that way, it could be incredibly awesome if, let's say you and I were sitting there playing, I was flying, you were shooting, and we were facing, 4 other R-Wings with an individual shooter and flyer.
Totally. I mean, that's a really awesome idea. The only thing I think the reason that won't happen is because, like you said, the two screen gameplay is going to be taxing as is. So when you have 2 screens, 2 players, 2 inputs, and then you're also going to have, this online of 4 other ships doing that, it's going to be way too taxing. And I don't know if online will even be a thing that happens for Star Fox.
I know, and it's too bad because I remember that being one of the biggest complaints for Star Fox on the 3DS, the remake, was that they had this kind of neat reduxed multiplayer mode and they didn't bring it to online. I don't know. I'm on the fence about it. I mean, on one hand, I agree. I don't think there'll be competitive multiplayer because I don't think Miyamoto's ever directed a game with online multiplayer. Has he? Like I don't think he has.
I can't think of one.
I mean, outside of Mario Kart and Smash Brothers, Nintendo doesn't really do a lot of games with online play.
Yeah, they're not. They're more focused on the core gameplay, and they love. I know they said it a million times, but they love that couch co-op, the couch competitive idea of being with people.
Yeah, and again with the short development times. I mean, with the way Nintendo unveils things now, especially games with online that need a lot of testing, like Splatoon and Mario Kart 8, like they didn't do beta testing on those games.
Yeah,
Like they didn't do open betas, I should say. They did internals, and those games were extremely tight online. Same with Smash Bros. And that extra development time went into making sure that it was a tight, seamless online experience. I mean, that with relatively low lag and stuff. And I have a feeling Splatoon's going to run really well online. I just don't think that with the short development time, an online mode is very possible with Star Fox.
totally. And I just want to add on to that because you're talking about the short development time, and I know there's a quote somewhere where Miyamoto says he kind of wants this game to be episodic in nature. Chapters, maybe DLC. So to me, it kind of raises the question of, does it need a long development time for those first 10 chapters to come out? And will they keep adding more chapters? Maybe online will be a thing eventually. Because it seems like this game is either an ongoing thing or, something you download certain missions. It doesn't seem to me like it's a game you buy at retail, all 30 levels are in the game, and that's the game. It doesn't seem like that from what he's talking about, which to me isn't something I'm a big fan of. I like you buy the game, that's the whole game. I don't like this continuous small little chapters, mini game, like little quirk for each level. I'm not a big fan of that, so we'll see how it all plays out, but yeah.
Certainly, I know what you mean. I mean, I'm on both sides of the fence because I think that it could be really neat having, let's say you buy the game and it has totally different levels, and in each mission, let's say, has its own little intro story and outro story that's separate. Like you're doing all these separate missions that aren't really connected, and and maybe you have leaderboards, right, to compare scores. Maybe it's a score-based thing.
Yeah.
But I don't really know. I mean, I think that it opens up more gameplay possibilities. I mean, Miyamoto's never been someone who focuses on storyline. And I don't really play Nintendo games for storylines anyways.
Yeah, me neither. It's all about the gameplay for me.
But I mean, you're right. I mean, if there's some really awesome, sweet dogfighting gameplay with the, cooperatively, then I would hate for that to only be in one level, and then the rest of the levels are simple little offshoot minigame fests,
Yeah, I know that I can't think of any. I mean, I guess other games that had the episodic nature. The only one that really comes to mind is The Walking Dead for some reason. But the games that release certain segments over time to me are some of the weakest gameplay games because it just seems like it's almost like shovelware. They're just dishing out all these.
They're disconjolted, yeah.
Yeah, there's no core gameplay. The really focused, created idea is kind of just like, oh, get more episodes out to sell more DLC.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think Nintendo's they're a very experimental company, and I'm open to the idea of buying the game maybe this November, getting 10 to 15 missions for $40, like a discounted price, and then getting like an additional 15 missions for $10 in the winter, and an additional 10 next summer, and an additional 10 next fall. And I'm open to that idea because the way I see this game, Star Fox, and the way I feel like Miyamoto's expressed it is there's so much possibility with the gameplay. It's like a playground of gameplay. It's like, hey, let's throw in a helicopter with a robot. Let's do some game where called Project Guard where you're controlling a security camera. Let's put you in an R-Wing with a co-op buddy. Let's put you in a tank. You know what I mean? There's so many options here that I think that, 10 new missions coming out in the spring could be like, whoa, like, who even thought that you'd bring the submarine back? Or who even thought that you'd include a brand new mode or a brand new type of thing you couldn't even think of? So I think there's a lot of interesting possibility. I mean, I wouldn't expect some grandiose, full, complete package this November. I just don't think it's possible with the development cycle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's what I mean. I don't think the short launch time really matters because it will be episodic, and I agree. Those things are really cool. I just want to make sure that they're not so gimmicky. And you touched on that point about I think it was Project Robot and Project Guard is what they're called.
Yeah, giant robot.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if they were confirmed to ever be even part of Star Fox, but he did show them all together. I think at E3. And, even the mention of the whole robot and the helicopter and then giant robot right beside it, makes me think that those two will definitely be in the same kind of gameplay, or at least incorporate the same kind of ideas, which
So,
would be cool.
so you think Project Giant Robot will be in Star Fox?
I think it's more likely than Project Guard, in my opinion. I
Really?
know you disagree with that, but to me, the fact that it even talks about a robot in a helicopter, and you can drop it down into buildings or whatever, is kind of like, why not incorporate the other project you've already been working on into that? It kind of seems like a seamless incorporation of the two. Where Project Guard kind of seems like this weird, security camera style game, mini game that really, to me, that has nothing to do with Star Fox. There's no, where's the mecha machine that you're flying or controlling? It's just this weird camera game that I'm not really sure I'm interested in.
Okay, well, I mean, just for our listeners here who don't know what Project Guard and Project Robot is, I'll give a little filler. So, at last E3 2014, Miyamoto basically showed 3 games that were in prototype phase. One was Star Fox, one was called Project Giant Robot, and one was called Project Guard. Project Guard had you kind of looking at 12 different security cameras, and you could see robots coming at each one, but each security camera you could shoot, and you kind of aim and shoot with the gamepad. And I agree, doesn't look very fun. I mean, it looks like it's fun once.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, unless they really do add a lot of content to that kind of idea, because I can see Miyamoto, really adding a lot of cool twists to that game, but I just don't know if that's a Star Fox-esque kind of concept.
well, to me, it just looked like a mean idea because if you look at the way it was played, you have your 12 security cameras that are labeled 1 to 12, and in the center was the one that you controlled with your gamepad. But only on the gamepad do you see a top-down map of the whole base with a number correlating to each one's that you have to tap. So basically, you're looking at your main screen, you're seeing, a bunch of people, little tiny robots attacking, let's say, camera 6. Then you have to look down at your gamepad, find 6, tap it, then look back up to aim and shoot. It actually sounds like it's, not very fun.
Yeah, or intuitive as far as control goes. But again, it is a prototype, and you're just kind of showing the possibilities of the gamepad.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be upset if that just disappeared.
Me too. I'm not for that. But let's talk about Project Giant Robot for a second, just because, like I said, it could be in Star Fox, and I think I'll do the filler for this one. Was when Project Giant Robot is you're controlling literally a giant robot in a city, and you use the gamepad to, I think it's to actually walk it and use it to punch by using its motion sensors, I think.
No, so what it works with the gyro sensor and the gamepad where you don't control the walking. It automatically walks, I believe, and moving the gamepad moves the torso.
Okay.
And then
Which is kind of on rails in a way.
Well, it's like a one-on-one. It's like a sock and bopper, the game.
Okay.
And each analog stick is your punch, so you can kind of like punch left and right and do jabs and kind of uppercuts, I think, with the analog sticks, while deking and ducking and swaying around your torso with the gamepad, which actually sounds really fun.
Yeah, that sounds kind of cool.
But my thought is that I had the opposite feeling where I felt like Project Guard seemed like a good, one-off mission in Star Fox because it's simple, it's on the side, it's whatever, it kind of could fit in the universe. Where Project Giant Robot, I mean, it looked kind of silly. In a fun way. I mean, you could make silly-looking robots, custom design, and it's like a one-on-one beat-em-up, even though you're only fighting the computer. It just it seemed too silly for the Star Fox universe.
See, but again, to me, these are gameplay prototypes, and I think if they, like you mentioned before, they take the gameplay first and then add the IP over it. So I think if they see a lot of people like that idea, they could easily put a Star Fox, make it a little more edgy, make it a little more in depth as far as the gameplay goes, instead of this whole silly robot one-on-one kind of thing. And I think it'd be incorporated way better than this weird security thing, which is not even gameplay relevant. At least the robot makes sense to the Star Fox universe as far as,
mechs.
Yeah.
I mean, the one cookie here that really makes me think that it's not part of Star Fox is that at the recent investor meeting, they showed off a slide that said announced Wii U titles scheduled for release in 2015, and Project Giant Robot was on its own.
Okay, so maybe it is on its own.
And my thought is that Project Giant Robot sounds like a fantastic online eShop title. It's the kind of game that doesn't sound. You can't play two players at the same time because the Wii U can only handle one gamepad,
Yeah.
and they're sure as hell not going to try to sell a second gamepad. No one's going to buy
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it could work really well online and really fun, and maybe you can paint and customize your robots. And I actually expect that to come out at E3 and be a big surprise for people. I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised, and
Okay.
I think I've always speculated that when they announce it again, when Project Giant Robot resurfaces, this is total guess, but I think it'll be available immediately.
Okay, that'd be a cool idea. I mean, they've done that before.
They've done it before, and I have a feeling. I just have a feeling.
So then, if you think that's the case, then I think neither of them will be Star Fox. So I'm almost 100% sure Project Guard will not be. It just seems totally not to the core of what Star Fox is. And I think Miyamoto, even though he's trying these new ideas, he still wants to have the relevancy of what Star Fox is in the game.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't think like I said, I wouldn't be unhappy if Project Guard just disappeared the way of the vitality sensor.
Yeah,
It goes the way of the vitality sensor. Let those guys work on something else.
Agreed. Yeah.
So back to I wanted to touch on one thing that we talked about earlier about the an online dogfight mode.
Okay.
I think it might be possible, for the simple reason that if this game is content light, it's only had a short development time. It's barely had a year to get polished, considering it was not even showable last E3 to the public. I really think that to incorporate a dogfight mode might be something that they could do, and something that they could do to flesh out the game in an easy way. I mean, Star Fox doesn't require a lot as long as it works online, they don't need to do anything crazy. They just need to say, "Hey, fly a R-wing, and here you go."
Yeah, I definitely think the idea of having online is a possibility. I'm just not so sure about the whole co-op idea. I mean, online single player or whatever is something that is very doable. As the Wii U has come out and more games come out, Nintendo is taking these opportunities to try out online more and more. They're getting more fluent in the online gaming world. So I think Star Fox is definitely a possibility. And like you said, it's not that hard. Just put an R wing or a couple R wings in a dome area or a couple tanks in a dome area with a few buildings, and you have a lot of fun. Just the whole co-op idea. I'm not sure that's something that they'll incorporate because, like you said, Inkling or Splatoon doesn't have co-op online, or doesn't seem like it will. So I don't know if Star Fox will either.
Well, it doesn't have co-op online, but you'll definitely be able to join up with a friend online and play.
Oh, for sure. Like I agree with that, but I don't think that Star Fox will have that co-op two people in the same ship. Simply for the fact that Nintendo will not do voice chat, and without voice chat, that two people in different online playing in the same cockpit can't be done.
No, unless you can only go online by yourself or with a friend co-op. So it's like we're playing couch co-op, but we're going online.
But I don't think that'll be possible. I don't think couch co-op online will happen.
I mean, I agree. I think it's a long shot, just because what if one person drops out? Then how does an AI make up for that? The aiming of someone on a gamepad.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, I just think that, at the end of the day, it's got to be easier now. I mean, I'm not a game designer. I don't know these things, but I just figured that it's got to be easier to make an online dogfight competition than it is to program really smart AI. And at the level where I'm flying the R-wing and only flying the R-wing, and you're only shooting with the gamepad, we're going to get pretty damn good at this game. And they're going to have pretty complex AI in order to even give us competition or a challenge. And I would hate for it to be something where it's easy, but if you do it in a certain time limit and blah, 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 it all of a sudden becomes harder through a score-based means. I'd rather it be hard inherently through challenging AI. Do you know what I'm saying?
So you want this difficulty to not be a Nintendo difficulty of a joke, basically.
Well, hey, Nintendo games are not as easy as people chalk them up to be.
I agree, but I'm not saying they're easy, but I'm saying they're all pretty playable and they're not challenging unless you're trying to 100% a game. But most of them are pretty straightforward. You can kind of do it with little ease or little difficulty.
But a game like Star Fox, this game sounds like it's being made for the hardcore. It's not being made for kids, per se.
I disagree with that, but okay.
I just think that at the level that you're flying and aiming on your gamepad, this is not something that a 5-year-old, you know what I mean? It's not Yoshi's Woolly World. It's not New Super Mario Bros. It's not Nintendo Land. It's something a little bit more complex.
I don't think it's for the hardcore though. I mean, it just doesn't seem like that to me. Nintendo is always not about the hardcore. They want hardcore elements, and they might have difficulty settings, but they're not for the hardcore. You know, and just the fact that they have all these different, the giant robot, the helicopter, the all these different ideas or the episodes, seems to me like they might actually just make this kind of a dumbed down game and for all the audience. And it doesn't seem very hardcore to its roots like the N64 game is.
I mean, I hate to agree with that. I'll feel really bad because I have imagining this amazing game, and I'll feel really bad if we sit down and play and you know, we're couch co-op here and we're just whooping ass because you can aim with such dexterity that we never had before in Star Fox, and I'm able to barrel and fly and deke, and it just becomes incredibly easy.
But you know what? To me, like, I kind of just went against what I am about to say, but Star Fox 64 wasn't necessarily hard. You know, the reason Star Fox is so liked isn't because it's difficulty. It's because you can keep playing, and it's hard to get perfect. And what I think would be cool is, for example, you know, in Kid Icarus for the 3DS, made by Sakurai, they had the 9-point scale system, and I don't know if it actually added more enemies, but it increased the difficulty by a landslide. I mean, anyone could do difficulty 2, but you added up to difficulty 9, and that game became insanely hard.
Yes, it was insanely hard. That's true.
So I think the difficulty options could definitely be there. So I'm not too worried about the difficulty, and you know, but I don't think it's going to be inherently difficult. I think it'll be a difficulty option that we'll have to purposely pick one of the higher ones.
So it's difficult through, you know, beating it within a certain time, getting a certain score, or even, it's not difficult because of the AI.
I don't even know if AI made Kid Icarus difficult. I think it's more you take a lot more damage or you do a lot less damage to the point where it's not, you know,
you just have to be way better. Yeah.
You have to be flawless in Kid Icarus. You know, you can't one hit take half your life. So I think Star Fox could totally do that as well, where, you know, you need to be flying perfectly and trust your partner to be shooting perfectly, because if one of you falls flat, you know, the other one's screwed.
True. And I think, you know, I agree with you. And I imagined one of the challenges being, you know, imagine you have to... Did you ever play Star Wars Shadows of the Empire on N64?
Yeah, I played a bunch of it, and I've seen you play every level of it.
Okay. There was the last mission in that game was kind of like you're in space and you have to fly into a station, remember? And then you have to like shoot in the middle.
Yeah.
So one of my ideas for the Star Fox that they could do to make it, you know, kind of challenging and require communication is that, let's say you have to fly into a building or a base, like a tunnel in a base, and you know you got to fly through this thing, but you have to shoot, like, let's say, an area of it. So, you know, we have to communicate basically saying, hey, I'm going to fly in now. Make sure you aim vertically on the ceiling, because on the ceiling is where we need to shoot this, you know, this weak point.
Yeah, or even the whole idea of, you know, let's say a narrow point and there's, you know, doors blocking two different ways or two different paths that are both being, you have to shoot to destroy one. If you're flying to the left and I'm shooting to the right, we're screwed basically. So I think
totally.
I think there's a lot of ideas for communication between the two different players, which I love about the whole idea of, you know, non-parallel cooperation, you know, not doing the same thing like you said, which I think is opens a lot of avenues for this game.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic about it. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I'm not against it, but to me, there's no gameplay. I mean, there's no real gameplay footage yet. There's nothing really shown for it, so I'm not pessimistic about it. I just think there's a lot left open-ended, and I just know that the past few Star Fox games have left me skeptical. So I think I'm just waiting to see what is revealed, hopefully at E3.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, it can either go two ways. It can either go, you know, the hardcore way or the easy gimmicky way. My gut instinct tells me it's going to land somewhere in the middle, but you know, people will be disappointed no matter what. It's Nintendo fans. people always have something to argue about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That just about wraps us up. This has been the Nintendo Bros podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, stay in touch.